Welcome to Midpoint, OCC's midweek podcast aimed at helping you connect with last week's message and prepare you for next week's sermon. Let's dive in.
Hello and welcome to this week's Midpoint. My name is Brenton. I'm the worship pastor, and I'm here with Andrew, the student ministries pastor.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking through his sermon, Daniel and the Holiness of God, which covered Daniel chapter 10 all the way to Daniel 11, verse 1.
Yes.
Which James will kind of go through verse 1 again, right? Because I looked at the notes.
Yeah, that's something he and I talked about a little bit. Originally, I was given just all of 10. And in my research, I realized that 11.1, most commentators really believe that 11.1 is attached. And so I sat down with James and was like, hey, based on my research, I think 11.1 is attached. And so I would really like to finish there. I don't know. He'll probably pick back up at 1 and keep going. But 11.1, based on all the research I did, is attached to 10.
So why did I guess we're jumping into it. Why did the translators or the separators or whatever you want to call them switch it from?
Oh man! So in my research, it was. I'm trying to remember exactly. It was based on just them reading the text and trying to determine based on what is going on. I think a lot of translators put it with what is in 11 and the explanation of the vision in 11 when they believe it's the use of the him, and the idea of when I stood up and I strengthened him, that commentators now look back and say, no, it's attached to a 10 because it's still attached to the messenger angel. Okay. So that's a tough one. I would have to do more research, but based on my research, it was pretty clear that most commentators believe it's attached to 10.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there were no chapter dividers.
Yeah. And
till what? So a couple hundred years ago? 15? No, not 15. A couple hundred years ago, at least, I think.
Yeah.
I forgot when the actual time was.
Was it like it had to be 1200s, 1300s, maybe into 15s at most?
Okay, so I was close with the 500.
Yeah.
That was 500 was in my mind. So
because I'm trying to remember exactly. Yeah, it had to be 1500 maybe.
James is probably in his head like, this is when it happened.
This is when you guys should know
James.
this. I don't remember. I'd have to sit down and look at everything out.
You can Google it.
And you and I have talked about this before, exactly what council took it and if any council took it, and there's all that stuff. So
yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation for another time.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk through. I did this last time with James, so we're going to do it again.
Okay.
But I only have 6. I don't have 10, so I have 6. But these are 6 things that I or we or you could have learned on this week's sermon.
Ooh, kind of like a top 10 almost.
Yeah, okay. Kind of top 10, but it's top 6.
Top 6. Okay.
Top 6. Okay. So number 1, this chapter took place 2 years after chapter 9 and around the time of Daniel and the lion's den.
Yeah. That's a pretty interesting, that was something I found. I didn't realize that. That really comes out from the timing of looking at the different kings in the 3rd year of Darius and just, was it 3rd year of Cyrus? And you put all those years together and you realize it's 2 years later. Mm-hmm. I also didn't realize that chapter 6 is that connected and that close to chapter 10, just based on timing. And a lot of that confusion happens with the 2 kings. And because you have 2 kings co-leading in the Medo-Persian Empire, they're leading at the exact same time. But then you're having to go, this is the 1st year of Cyrus, but this is the 2nd year of Darius. And so you're trying to piece all these guys together, and that gets really complicated really quickly.
Well, then even just going back from, like, reading forward and then going back in time and then reading forward and then going back in time and just the way chapters jump kind of thing, it can be confusing. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting that right around this time that this vision happens, either right before or right after, Daniel has either just experienced the Daniel and Lion's Den or he's about ready to experience. And then you got to think about looking at that Christophany. That Christophany has just happened in the lion's den. Well, no, that would be that's not the lion's den. Wow, what am I struggling here? That would be
the furnace.
Furnace.
Yes.
So he's either had that, he had that a while ago, and now he's getting it again, with the furnace, and now he's having it here. But Daniel Lion's Den was either right before or right after. So it's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah. Well, Daniel wasn't in the furnace, though, was he?
It wasn't. My brain is really, really all over the place.
You're good. You're good.
That would be Meshach, Daniel, that'd be those guys that I can't even pronounce.
Shadrach, Meshach,
and
Abednego.
Abednego.
Yeah, I don't know their I know one of them was Azariah.
Yeah.
I know that was their Hebrew name.
Yeah.
I think only because that was what we were going to name our son Azariah.
Really?
If he was a daughter, we were going to name,
Azariah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was not Daniel in the fiery furnace.
No, but it was in the book of Daniel, which is why you were going.
Yeah.
I got you.
My brain is really strong.
That was an assist.
So
I get credit for that assist.
Yeah, but I think it's interesting that we get, and Daniel 9's is happening so close to chapter 10. It's right before, right after. And so you have these massive events that are happening so close to each other. It's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. Number 2 thing you could have learned this weekend from Pastor Andrew. This chapter changes from the third person to the first person. Yeah. I actually didn't pick up on that when I was reading it. I was like, oh, yeah, it does change.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy to overlook.
It happens quick. It happens really quick. And I've seen that a couple times within Daniel. I think the last one I preached in Daniel did it too, where it's this almost like this intro that's third person. And it's this, zoom out to 30,000 foot view of the text, and it's this intro of it, and then it zooms in, and it's now you get the details of the first person point of view. And I thought that was interesting. It wasn't make it or break it to the text, I would say, but it helped to get kind of some perspective that, no, this is starting out with this 30,000 foot view, this explanation, and then we're zooming into Daniel actually experiencing this. Was really cool.
Yeah. So I thought that was good.
It was one of those that happens quick, and like you said, if you don't pay attention, you just read right past it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and then you kind of get lost in how you're reading it. So just kind of paying attention to the pronouns and things like that. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it is.
All right, number 3, fasting is to remove something in order to better focus on someone.
I like your
someone being capital.
Yeah, I like your choice of someone there. That's slightly leading, I feel like.
Yeah. I'm a pastor, so you got to throw that in there.
You got to lead them a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes in our title. I don't know, leading. That's a conversation for another time. Okay. Anyway, the whole idea of fasting. Fasting is such an interesting one, and I know you've done this at times. I think you did it the last. Was it the last read through the Bible?
Read through the New Testament.
Yeah, you fasted through that. I've done it at times. Fasting is such an incredible thing, and I think that sadly, it's definitely kind of trickled off in our modern day Christianity.
Yeah.
I know kind of growing up, almost being like fasting, the only time you were to fast is if like you were in crisis or you had a massive decision and so I think that's kind of my misunderstanding of it as growing up was this idea of like, well, I'm in crisis right now or life has spiraled out of control or, for example, like, graduating high school, I got to make a decision what college I'm going to go to. I'm going to fast for a couple days and make it.
It's kind of like a Hail Mary or,
Yeah, exactly.
Adds extra juice to the prayer.
Yeah,
kind of
you're marinating the prayer with fasting. And I think that's such a misrepresentation of fasting is. I mean, yeah, you see that Daniel is in some crisis here and he's fasting through that. But I think that fasting at the core is this idea of I'm going to deny myself, which we're literally called throughout Scripture to deny ourselves.
Yeah.
And we're going to deny ourselves something so that we're able to focus fully on Christ. And I use that analogy of, maybe in our technology-driven world, we're denying ourselves our phone. So every time we reach in for a back pocket or a pocket to pick up our phone, we're like, oh, my phone's not there, and this is why my phone's not there.
Yeah.
Or every time you open the cabinet for that sweets, you're like, well, I'm going to actually pause, and I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go and sit down and pray, or I'm going to listen to a worship song. It's the idea of intentionally stopping yourself, removing something so that gap in your life is filled and reminding you to fill it with Christ. And so,
my buddy's a student pastor in Utah, and he students in college and young adults and stuff like that. And he did a 3-day fast with his with some kids and
complete fast too, probably
complete fast, from food.
And
he said that it was hard the first day, but then like the second and third day he was really able to focus on God, and it was a really good experience. And then he had people at the end of that third day, they broke the fast with like this feast together and prayer and everything like that. And he said, dude, it's the first time that I've ever worshiped eating. Like he goes, it brought me to tears.
I bet.
But he was like, it was such a cool spiritual experience that whole time, like being drawn to God, being reminded of God, and then having like God fill your needs, like it was when he ate. That it was really, truly a spiritual experience. And he like telling me about it, he was like kind of tearing up. And he was like, dude, it was so amazing. And he goes, I remember taking a bite and just being like, thank you, God.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool.
That's awesome.
I don't know if I'd do the 3-day fast, but it was really cool.
I'm trying to remember the longest. I don't know. I know for sure I've done like a full day. I think I may have done a couple days in college. It was brutal. Those are tough. Those are really hard.
And then it says not to like let people know you're fasting.
Yeah.
So you're like, I can't tell anybody.
Well, that's that.
I want to complain to everybody.
I want to complain to everybody. Yeah. And then you go into the New Testament, and that's where you see the Pharisees, and exactly them being like, I'm fasting. This like wearing a sign, and and so it's not about drawing attention. It's about you and God. And I love that quote. I mean, I love commentaries, and so I often preach. And I want to make sure I yank in commentaries.
Yeah.
Because I have been so blessed by commentaries that I want others to hear this stuff. I don't want it to just be all my words. I'd like to let people hear from commentaries. And that commentary about like it's fasting, it's between you and God. And it has to be between you and God. It's not about what other people think. It's about you and God.
Yeah, because if it's about what other people think, we read this as a group earlier in Matthew, like if you make it about you and like other people recognizing you, then that's your treasure. Like you've already gotten paid.
Yeah, exactly.
Essentially. But you're if you're really wanting fasting to work, which is to bring you closer to God, then it needs to be between you and God and you and God only.
And I think that's, I had someone come up to me last night and they were like, well, Andrew, talk to me a little bit about like, if I just have coffee, is that fasting? And I'm like, dude, the reality is this is between you and God. Like, don't make this a legalistic mindset. If you are wanting to fast, do what you're comfortable with. Fast in the way you're comfortable with. Don't go and, do something that's going to harm yourself, but fast in the way you're comfortable with. If you're not comfortable with removing food, then remove something else. And I heard a pastor at one time talk about the idea of like, hey, if you struggle with eating issues, if minimal eating or too much eating, don't do food fast.
Yeah.
Or, if food's a massive issue, then do something else. Don't do something that's going to cause yourself to stumble or hurt yourself. And I've heard of people that struggle with eating and eating too little,
eating disorders or something like that,
and then being like, "Well, great, this is my way to say it's spiritual to not eat." I'm like, no, that's not what this is saying. This is an idea of a greater spiritual mindset. Yeah, throughout Scripture we see mainly just food fasting, but it's the heart. Yeah, it's truly the heart.
Well, and there should be some level of sacrifice when you are fasting.
Absolutely.
I mean, like I could fast swimming in the pool, like in the winter.
Of course,
like, I'm gonna, and that's why I said it. I know how to swim. But like you could fast something like that and be like, I'm not gonna go, I'm not gonna spend $1,000. Like,
I could fast from dunking.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, you're not really making a sacrifice. You're doing it for yourself.
Brenton, how dare you? I love to dunk.
I'm not going to do that joke.
I dunk every day before bed.
There you go.
You
dunk those Oreos in your mouth. There you go.
Exactly. You nailed it. There it is. Yeah. Well, no, I mean,
second assist.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, but the reality is it has to be a sacrifice.
Yeah.
That's where the idea of denying yourself, that's where the idea of dying to your desires for the purpose of intentionally seeking Christ and becoming more like him. And I mean, I love that quote too of the idea of giants of the faith. And I did that massive list. These giants of faith have done it. Why wouldn't we as modern saints consider doing it? Yeah. And so I think my greatest encouragement is like, do not make it legalistic. Yeah. Make it what you're comfortable with. Have your heart be about honoring God. And if you're like, I want to take a 5-day fast and only have, only meat or only like bread and water for 5 days. And if you mess up, that's okay. Like, don't sit there and be like, oh my goodness, and beat yourself up. This is between you and God. Keep the heart of it and keep going. I don't make it legalistic. Don't go that route.
Yeah. You're missing the point.
You're absolutely missing the point. So,
all right. Number 4, there is a debate between this heavenly being in, verse 6, being an angel or the pre-incarnate Christ. Yeah. I didn't know there was a debate.
There's a massive debate, pretty huge debate. So what's funny is that this sermon took me so much longer to research than probably any other sermon I've preached. There was just so much to it. And there's so much back and forth. And that's where you get this idea of who is this being, and is this being the same being you see later? And we have a question about that we can talk about. But there's a pretty big, heavy debate about it. And the debate really is back and forth on, is the heavenly being you see with the belt and with the, the burnished, bronze arms and legs, is that being an angel? And some say that it's possibly Gabriel, or is that the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, a Christophany?
Yeah.
And so there's a pretty heavy back and forth. When I read, there's commentators that are on both sides. I would say the majority of commentators really settle on that it's a Christophany. And I mean, in the examples I gave,
and just to clarify, a Christophany is
an appearance or manifestation of the pre-incarnate Jesus Christ. So it'd be a physical appearance of him.
Okay.
And so that would be what we see. My opinion is I so settle on that. I think it's so obvious that it's the pre-incarnate Jesus.
Yeah.
And the big one when I was kind of talking through this with my wife was the idea that the belt is such a massive factor in that. The fact that belt of Uphaz, that the golden belt of Uphaz, the only other place we see that in Scripture is on the risen, exalted Jesus Christ in Revelations. I mean, I think that is a massive check mark.
Yeah.
And not one that you really can argue with. The debate really as well goes around the idea of, well, we see some language regarding this being that is similar to angels, some of that, voice like a multitude and some like that. You see similar language with angels, but I also think that the language we see here is so different than what we see with angels, and it has to be so much that it's I believe it's God himself.
Yeah.
There's a pretty heavy debate. What was your thoughts on that?
Yes.
Okay.
I would also say it was the pre-incarnate Christ. It seems to make sense with his eyes, the voice, all those things. Like even just how he presented himself. I was like, oh yeah, it's like reading it. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's Jesus. Like that's what I immediately went to. And I'm glad you clarified later on, and you said in talking about verse 11, how it switches to now this other angel comes and talks, but that being in verse 6 is just there, but is not the one that interacts with Daniel.
And that's where, we can jump ahead. That's where the debate really rests, is that part right there, because they say if the being that we see earlier in the passage is an angel, one, that just doesn't make sense. And then they say, okay, great. If the being is Jesus Christ, then what happens later? Are we going to say that Jesus Christ is held up by evil demon spirits? Theologically, that doesn't make sense. Yeah. And so that's where the debate happens is, okay, what do we do with this? Is it the same person? Is it an angel? And mainly the debates would be, the reason they believe the divine being's an angel is they would say it's one person all the way through the passage.
Yeah.
And I wrestle with that. I don't see it being one person. I see it being a vision that appears and then an angel coming in and attending to Daniel.
Yeah.
And they would say, well, it's one person because, Jesus Christ can't be held up by demons. And I would say, well, no, I agree with you, but it's two people. It has to be two people.
Yeah.
And so
it makes more sense reading it as two.
Yeah.
As two heavenly beings than just the one showing up with the belt and all this descriptions that are very, very similar to how we would describe Christ in the Bible and in the book of Revelation, and then go, well, no, it's an angel. Like it seems to me like it's pointing more towards Christ. But I'm not a massive theologian, so I'm like I'll read the commentaries and be swayed, but that's kind of where I'm leaning right now.
And and I think that's what really. Because when I first started researching this passage, I was really struggling with it. I'm like, okay, what do I do with this idea of this being being held up by the Prince of Persia? Like, what does that mean? And that's what took me so long to research is, okay, is it one person? If it's not one person, who are the two people? If it is one person, then what happens with this person? Is it an angel or is it Christ? And how do I wrestle with that? And so that's where I really settled. And most commentaries led me to being this is two people.
Yeah.
The risen, pre-incarnate Jesus Christ, and then an angel, most likely Gabriel.
Yeah.
And Gabriel was the one that was held up for 3 weeks, and then Michael came in and swooped in and rescued him.
Yeah.
And so we'll see, I'll spoil a little bit, we'll see in 11 and 12, the pre-incarnate Jesus shows back up a little bit later. But there's a massive debate.
Yeah.
And it's back and forth, and commentators really fight on it because I think everyone struggles with what to do with it.
Well, and we're probably not going to solve it today.
No.
Yeah.
And I am happy to sit here, and this was, people came and talked to me. I'm happy to sit here and say, this is what I believe based on all the research I did.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers. I really don't. And, I struggle with thinking that what we see in verse 6 is an angel, but I can see some debate there, but this is where I rest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
That's good. I think it's good.
It was a super interesting passage to research. And it was a blast to kind of go through and think through what's going on and who are the people. And so, yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah. All right, number 5, you like words that end in ophany.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I kind of had to, but, with this one.
Well, you were throwing in some big words. I was like, ooh, well, there we go. Showing off that master's degree.
Every once in a while. No, I had to keep up with you. So, well, no, I was struggling with that a little bit because I'm like, I want to use these words. I think these words are important to use.
Yeah.
But I also am like, I'm struggling with these words. I'm struggling with what these words mean. I don't want to. We always talk about like putting things on every shelf.
Yeah.
And
when you preach.
Yeah, putting cookies on every shelf when we preach. Those who are very theologically astute and those who are brand new believers and being able to attend to everybody. And I'm like, these words are key, and I want everyone to understand these words, but I also don't want to overwhelm people. Yeah. And so I was struggling with that a little bit. But yeah, Christophany, theophany, those are incredible words that have so much rich meaning to them. And being able to walk through those words. But yeah, I guess I do like words in with ophany.
Yeah. So define them again real quick.
Yeah.
So Christophany is?
Christophany would be in a physical manifestation or appearance of Jesus Christ before he was born and walked the earth as a man.
Okay. And then a theophany?
Theophany would be a physical manifestation or appearance of God himself.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll get into that.
We'll get into that. But yeah, so there is times that you see in Scripture where it would be a theophany, a physical manifestation of God, and then it would not be a Christophany. And that's the beauty of the Trinity, the way it works out. But yeah, and that's what I kind of mentioned in there. I didn't want to get into the Trinity a ton because the Trinity is incredibly complicated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it made sense to me when you were like, sometimes a theophany is not a Christophany. I'm like, makes sense. And you're like, sometimes, or like all the time, a Christophany is a theophany. I'm like, totally makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And we move on.
Yeah. I was like, I'm good.
Yeah, let's go check.
Keep going. All right.
Yeah, but it's a super interesting. Theophany, Christophany are incredible words that have so much rich meaning to them. Yeah. And I wanted to use them, and I wanted to talk about it, and I wanted to use real words, but they're heavy, big words.
Yeah. We don't need to be scared by big theological words. It's all good.
Yeah, we have to use them.
All right, and last thing that you might have learned when you came to church, there is a whole lot of stuff going on in the unseen spiritual world.
Amen.
Yeah.
I think that's so true. And that's kind of where God kind of dropped me with this passage, is that kind of moment where I kind of stepped back and was like, what prayer have I prayed that's being held up in spiritual warfare? And that was kind of a little bit of like helping myself realize that there is so much going on that I know nothing about. Mm-hmm. And that we need to not be so quick to be like, God, I prayed 2 seconds ago and you haven't shown up.
Yeah.
Like, one, he works in his own time, but two, there's spiritual warfare. So we got to understand that there's things happening we know nothing about.
Yeah.
And I think that's such a cool thing. I think that we as Christians, modern day Christians, can forget at times that there is a massive spiritual battle going on.
Yeah. And it's real.
It's 100% real.
And that's why it's like our fight is not, or our battle is not, or our enemy is not flesh and bones.
Yeah.
It is the spiritual powers, the principalities of this world.
That's Ephesians. And it was that's such an interesting thing. And I think we have to remind ourselves, we as Christians don't need to be sitting here, quaking in our boots about it, because the battle's already been won ultimately.
Yeah.
But I think we also need to be careful to not go in and dabble within evil spiritual stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's a real battle going on.
Yeah. Like Ouija boards and like you don't want to allow those things in. Yeah. My wife will not. She doesn't watch any movies that are like demon possessions or stuff like that.
I don't either.
I have seen them. I won't say I won't watch them, but I pretty much don't watch them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've watched a couple here and there, but for the most part, that's not movies that we kind of entertain in our home. And she's just like, it's not worth it. It's totally not worth it, because like I don't want to even allow the devil a foothold in our home. And
for me, like, I don't watch them, one, because of that, but two, I won't sleep for a week.
Yeah.
Like, I legit won't.
So I saw this movie. It was actually, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to.
You're fine. Yeah, it's one of those kind of movies.
But I saw it. It was about an exorcism, and I saw it before I came to Christ.
Oh no!
And I was like, oh, that was a good movie. Like, oh, that was really cool. It was kind of scary.
Yeah.
And then I came to Christ, and then I watched it again. I don't know why I watched it again. I don't know what the order of events was. And I was terrified. Like, I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All of this makes so much more sense, and I am terrified. Like, it made it worse for me. But just like, understanding like this is real. Like this isn't just
so real.
this isn't fantasy. It's not like Harry Potter.
No.
This is like there are battles going on right now before, our veiled eyes that we can't see. So,
and I think that's such a truth of like we cannot give Satan any footholds into our life. And I think those things, I mean, hey, that's between you and God. Like if those that are listening, if you want to watch those movies between you and God, I would just caution you, what are you allowing into your eyes and into your heart, but also what footholds could you be giving to Satan? And because there is a massive spiritual battle going on, and like where are we at with those things? And so,
when some of those movies romanticize it to where they make it to where it's not that bad, or this, or even if I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of them, but like at the end, if like the bad guy still has the whatever, and it's like it's kind of is there going to be a second movie? It's like stuff like that, and like the cliffhangers that you just use for theatrical purposes. It's like you don't need to romanticize that. Like that's. Playing with fire.
This is real stuff. Yeah, and it's real. So that's it. I think I love that statement of like there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't know about.
Yeah. All right, that was the top 6 things you might have learned.
Nice.
Yeah,
I like it.
Okay, so we have a couple sent in questions.
Yeah,
and let's just take that. So, what is OCC's take on the Holy Trinity? I think this question was sent to us by Bryce, and he was really just wanting to know, like, hey, why don't we talk about it as much? And basically his question was, what is OCC's take? And there you go. So go.
I mean, I think part of his question's coming like, why don't we talk about it a whole bunch? I mean, I agree with you. I think we should talk about it more. I think this sermon specifically, I didn't get into it a whole lot because it wasn't core to where we're going to define the Trinity and get into everything about the Trinity, massive theology about Trinitarian theology wasn't core to where we're going. I wanted to mention it because of the reality of the theophany and Christophany.
Yeah.
And I thought it was key for us to understand the relationship between those two and how one is always the other and one is not always the other. Yeah. And so I thought that was key to define, but I didn't. Yeah. I think when I preach, I really try hard to have a main idea and that everything I say funnels back to the main idea. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't go into defining and going all about the Trinity because for me, this passage, it didn't funnel back to where the passage was going, the main idea of this passage.
It would have been a huge detour.
Oh, it would have been a massive left turn.
Because you would have had to just then describe more terms. And And so if you were going to summarize the Trinity for people that just don't know, do you have like a 1-line or 2-line sentence that you always say?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest explanation is we believe in one God and 3 persons. That's the easiest explanation. Those 3 persons are Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. They are equal. And I mean, that's much beyond that. You start getting super complicated.
Co-equal,
co-eternal, co-powerful, but there is an aspect of, there is some submission to each other, willing submission. I mean, there's so much to it.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I've had it said, we believe in 1 what and 3 whos.
Yeah.
So, we are 1 what and 1 who. Like we are human.
Yeah.
And we are, like you are Andrew, I am Brenton.
Yeah.
So, that's our who and that is our what.
Yeah.
But God is 1 what, which is God. So our being is human, his being is God.
Yeah.
And then we are 1 what, which is me, Brenton.
Yeah.
And he is 3, which is Father, Son, Spirit.
Yeah.
And so like you can't put him in the box of humanity because he created humanity, so he's outside of humanity.
Exactly.
So
And
1 what, 3 whos.
And that one gets really tricky really quickly because we were laughing about this, and I think you put the video on that I see in the notes of this, like the bad analogy within this. What is it called?
Lutheran satire video, bad analogies.
Yeah, and it
totally go watch it. It's wonderful,
hilarious. But you start getting into these big theological concepts of what you would call like modalism or Arianism, and those would be partialism, and you get into these ideas of that you try to start explaining the Trinity, but really we're not explaining it in a way that is true, and it starts to get what I would say is heresy.
Yeah, it waters down the truth of what God is.
Yeah, and the reality is that we can understand what we can about the Trinity but it's a mystery. And that's the beauty of the Trinity, is it's a mystery that we can understand as much as we can, but I don't think we can nail that down to in our human terms, because it's not in our human terms.
Yeah. Well, it's the finite trying to understand the infinite.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're not going to do it.
Yeah, and I don't think it's up to us to sit here and nail down every aspect of something that we can never truly understand.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is that, the Trinity is not, different sides of God. That would be kind of modalism. They're not different modes or sides. And the Trinity is one God in three persons. And they are co-equal, they're coexistent, they're co-eternal.
There's a picture of the Trinity that is helpful. That is the triangle.
Yes, with the circle.
With the circles, and it says, God is in the center of the triangle, and at each vertice is the Father, the Son, the Spirit, and it's like, the Father is God, the Son is God, the Spirit is God, but the Father is not the Son is not the Spirit is not the Father.
Exactly.
But they're all God.
Yes.
And they're all fully God. So if you see the Son, which is why you're Christophany and theophany, if you see the Son, because the Son is God, it is a theophany.
Exactly.
But if you see the Spirit or you see the Father, it's not a Christophany, because the Father is not the Son is not the Spirit.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, I got you.
Yeah.
We're good.
I had to say that one, and I knew that one would be something that certain people would be able to catch, and others would be like, I guess I'm not sure. But it was essential. I think we needed to say it, and it needed to be said that a Christophany is always a theophany. A theophany isn't always a Christophany.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah.
Cool. Good stuff.
Second question. We're on the topic of Christophany and theophany. Why bring it up, and how do they correlate to each other and the chapter?
I think this came in from Kelly. Yeah. Kelly. Shout out to Kelly. So we kind of defined this a little bit already. Christophany is the physical appearance or manifestation of Christ, and a theophany would be the physical appearance or manifestation of God himself. Why bring it up? Because it was essential to the passage. When you go through the passage and you settle on the fact that vision of the being is in verse 6 is Christ, you have to just go down the road of explaining what's going on. I think that you have to go there. In my opinion, I would have been doing the body a disservice by not at least going there. And I would not have been shepherding them well if I did not at least explain what a Christophany was. I think I probably could have stopped and not gone all the way down the road of a theophany. But the moment I explain a Christophany, I'm like, why not just explain a theophany? They're so intertwined, and it's so essential to what's going on here that I thought I would be doing them a disservice to not go down that road.
Yeah.
But and then we kind of talked about this as well. They correlate with each other because they are similar, but yet at aspects they're different. And so I think it's important to show what's going on and how they fit to the passage, but also how they fit to life itself. And so,
yeah. Okay.
Any thoughts you want to add to that?
No. I thought you did a good job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna do one of these questions. I think the best one really would be, why do you think that God allowed the timeline for Daniel to wait? Daniel prayed for 3 weeks, waiting for this answer from God. Yeah. And as you said, God could have just showed up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But he allowed Gabriel, we presume, to come, and then when Michael came and helped out, then Gabriel was able to go. Why do you think God allowed that 3-week timeline? And then I guess the question on top of that, maybe you can answer this one, which is, why does he allow us to wait for an answer that might take weeks, months, years, or even a lifetime to be answered?
And I think those questions are one and the same, and I think the applications are the same. I think God allowed Daniel to go through that because there was something that God needed Daniel to grow through that process. And what exactly Daniel needed to witness and to experience and to, trust in God for 3 weeks was between him and God. But I think there was a reason that he needed to wait for 3 weeks. Part of that reason is that the angel was held up. And I think part of that reason was there needed to be spiritual warfare between the angel and the spiritual forces of the Prince of Persia. And I would definitely settle on that there was some sort of battle or some sort of warfare that had to take place that was essential to the overall plan of God that took that time. Mm-hmm. And so I think in some ways Daniel was a effect or a cause and effect of what was happening between spiritual warfare. But I also think that God allowed that to take place so Daniel could grow, and Daniel could be challenged and really grown through that 3 weeks that then left him in this incredible life-altering moment of seeing Christ and of witnessing and experiencing this angel and everything that took place.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think the 3 weeks made that moment so much sweeter. But yeah, I don't know exactly. I would definitely lean that there was some sort of growth that had to happen.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's a good answer.
What thoughts do you have there?
No, that's what I would probably say too, that there was something that Daniel needed to go through, or even something that, because this is written in God's word, so that we can understand that there are principalities and spiritual matters, and that sometimes you need to wait for an answer. Like those kind of lessons are just, they're right there on the page that I think God wanted Daniel to write down.
And I think the application of that, where you go, the second part of that question is a really easy softball of that's exactly true for us too. You know, there's times that things take weeks. There's times that things take days. There's times that, God is answering stuff in seconds. But he's allowing us to go through that timeline for growth.
Yeah, for us to see him better.
For us to see him better, for us to become more like him, for us to work through whatever we're going through. And that's where that kind of, God kind of dropped me, is like, how often do I sit here and go, okay, God, I prayed 2 seconds ago and I haven't had an answer.
Yeah.
Come on, let's go, chop, chop.
Yeah. I fasted, answer it.
I fasted. Come on, I skipped one meal, God. No,
yeah.
And I think there's a reality of like, are we willing to wait it out?
Yeah.
Are we willing to wait it out? I remember
we're willing to trust.
Yeah. And the kind of my personal story with that is, I stopped physically growing freshman year of high school. Mm-hmm. And I remember for me, freshman year of high school, I used to wake up every morning and flip off the covers off my bed and be like, am I 6 foot now? No, dang it. And I used to do that literally, like, I remember that was like a joke for me. It was like, I would flip off the covers and be like, oh, I'm not 6 foot yet. God's not answered my prayer. And that was a real process I had to walk through of like, okay, what does this mean that I'm praying? Every night I'm praying. Every night I'm praying that God would heal me and make me tall. Yeah. Every night. And then I wake up every morning, flip off the covers, and I'm still me. And I think for me, it had to be, there was a process for me that I had to go through. And there was such a growth process that I'm still growing through. Like, there's still times that I am, I wrestle with my height. And there's still times that I'm embarrassed about the size I am, or that jokes hit me too hard, or that, there's still stuff that way, and I have to grow through that. Mm-hmm. But for me, like, I looked at this and I looked at this passage and I'm like, how many times am I sitting here and I'm not like Daniel and I'm going, God, come on. I prayed. And I remember that was for me. And, early in high school, I would be like, okay, I'll go to bed and I'll pray. God, make me tall. Wake up the next morning. Dang it, God. And that was me. And I'm like, I have to grow through that. And I have to learn that I need to trust God. And that just because I prayed the night before that God would make me tall, and I wake up the next morning, I'm not. Like, that doesn't mean God's mean. That doesn't mean that God's not listening. That doesn't mean that God's missed me. It means that my desires and God's plan are two different ones, and I need to be willing to, for lack of better words, elevate my plan to his, and be willing to trust his plan and not expect him to get on my wavelength. Yeah. And that's a process. And I kind of put myself in Daniel's shoes of like, what would that have been like to be sitting here for 3 weeks, fasting and praying and being like, God, I'm still waiting. God, I'm still waiting. God, I'm still waiting. And then how incredible would that have been to be Daniel and have this life-altering, pre-incarnate Jesus Christ show up and reveal everything that I was asking. Like, that would have been incredible. So that's me. I mean, that's kind of where I walk with it. And God had to take me through something. And I think that if we're willing to wait it out, if we're willing to trust God and not sit here and be like, come on, God, come on, God, come on, God, but we're willing to wait it out and be like, God, you'll show up when you're ready. Yeah. And I think there's some massive growth that we can go through. Yeah.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm 6'1", and I still can't dunk. So
I'll teach you how someday.
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I'll get a kitty hoop and I'll teach you how.
Yeah, that'll be good. That'll be fun. We'll sell tickets to it.
I like making fun of myself.
Yeah.
But there's every now and then. So
I gotcha.
It's good. But no, I like this top 6 or top 10 idea. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, this was good stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. That's all the time we have. Thanks for joining us and Midpoint.
Yeah.
If you'd like to send in questions, you can send us either a text message or email, occpodcast@lewistonocc.org.
Yes.
Make sure to join us for services on Sunday at 9 a.m. And 10:30 a.m. and then also Monday night at 7 p.m. But anything else you want to say before we close out?
Well, it looks like, James is going to continue right on through Daniel.
Yeah.
And walk us through chapter 11.
The cliffhangers you left us on.
Yeah. I dropped us right on the cliff and said, have fun.
Yeah.
So, well, hey guys, thanks for listening. Brenton, it was good to spend some time with you.
Yeah. And everybody listening, just know that you are loved by God and loved by us here at OCC.
Have a great week.